I became a successful high school soccer coach. At 23, I was a head coach at Azusa Pacific University, and at 25, I was living the American dream. I really thought I had it all together on the outside. I owned my first home at age 25. I drove a nice car. I had money. My university soccer team was successful. My high school soccer team was winning. I was a rising star as soccer was developing. And yet I was the most miserable person on the planet. At least that's how I felt. I was plagued by fear, doubt, worry, frustration. I was often discouraged, depressed, and even lonely. And yet on the outside, people never saw that because I never let on. And the more it seemed like my teams won, the more miserable I got. I came to a point where I really didn't think I wanted to live anymore. And I remember one night, it was in the middle of the night, I woke up in my home in Claremont, California, and I decided I was going to get in my car and drive up this road called Glendora Mountain Road, where the teenagers would always drive drunk, and every few years someone would end up driving off a cliff. Well, I had decided at that point that life wasn't worth living and that I wanted to take that road and miss a turn. And as I was walking across the living room of my home, somehow I found myself on my knees looking up, and I can remember exactly what I said as I looked up with tears streaming down my eyes. I said, "Lord, I believe, help me to believe. If you can straighten out the mess that my life is in." And I said, "I'll become a missionary and go to deepest, darkest Africa, and I'll get up in front of people and speak." Now, what's ironic about that is that's what I was afraid of. Growing up in a great mission-sending church, I remember missionaries always coming to our church, and I thought they were really weird. Well, I was one of them now. At that point, I said, "Lord, whatever you want me to do." I had no idea what he'd want me to do. All of a sudden, I opened the Bible, and it was like the scales had fallen off of my eyes, and I realized how much that God loved me and cared for me, even though I'd been so afraid of him. And it really came about because I began reading about David, who I was named after. And I looked at King David, and I read, it said he was a man after God's own heart. And I looked at the things he'd done. He had sinned greatly, but because he was driven by his own lust, he lusted after a woman. He had her husband put to the front of a battle and killed, and then he took her as his wife. And later, the prophet Nathan came to him and told him that this was a great sin that he'd committed. And so this is the man I was named after. And I can't think of very many more sins that are more despicable, but yet God loved David, David loved God, David repented. And I said, well, if God can love him, the man I was named after, with all the sins and all the failures he had, then he obviously is going to love me. And literally I went from having no self-esteem to developing self-esteem and confidence because I knew that Christ loved me and he had a purpose for my life.